Hello everyone! I just wanted to do a quick verbal disclaimer here as usual before we get into things. Because this is a video about my OC content, it means that I will be mentioning some subjects that might be triggering or uncomfortable to some viewers. Content warnings will be up on the screen now, so if you're a kid or sensitive to heavier themes in general, then maybe steer clear of this video and others in this series. With that being said, let's get into things. Greetings, my fellow degenerates, my name is Rot and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, then hi, hello, howdy-o, nice to have you here with me. This is the 5th part of my series, POV I Hold You Hostage and Force You to Listen to Me ramble about my OCs. If you haven't seen any of the other parts to this series before, then the whole point of it is to discuss some general information about each of my OCs in a universe I created called Fangoria, also called Fangoria for short. Before I jump into things, as usual, if you'd like to support me and have some access to my work in progress art and some other perks, consider becoming a member on Ko-Fi today. You can also support me just by watching the rest of this video. Also, thank you goes out to my friend Tem, also known as Belina LPS, for looking over the script and adding some ideas of his own. I will link his Tumblr where he takes questions about Fangoria stuff in the description, as he is also the creator of characters like Ratboy and Dwaylen Breyer, so he is the place to go for information about them. Finally, I want to mention the Fangoria Toy House world. So, on different occasions, people have asked me if they would be able to create Fangoria OCs, headcanons, and other canon-divergent fan content. I want to let everyone know that yes, you can definitely do so. Feel free to create fan OCs and AUs or whatever else. Though, please only do so in reference to my characters. Characters like Waylon and Ratboy are not to be changed or tampered with. For your OCs, you can make up a fantastical species, or you can make a character based off an existing one as well. Pretty much any kind of creature is allowed, so get creative. You can submit fan characters to the Fangoria Toy House world that is linked in the description. And when the first character is added, I will create a fan characters section on the character page. So feel free to send an invite to be a part of the world, but just make sure you read all of the content warnings and the FAQ. Okay, back to the video. Alright, so if you've just kinda known me from my YouTube content and not much for outside of it, then you may not know that I'm a horror artist. I'm a Morut Yami Kawaii horror artist, and much of my work contains dark themes, violence, and general discussions of probably triggering things. So, like, take that as a second warning, I guess. I have always loved and adored horror and dark themes, and that love is manifested and reflected in the way that I construct characters in the world that they live in. In short, Fangoria is sort of a vent universe. All of my characters are either terrible, horrible people, or are else victims of terrible, horrible people. A lot of the violence and pain in the world is also offset by absurdist humor and an over-the-top comedic edge, so the characters and world are overall fun and therapeutic to write. Just like last time in this OC rundown, I'll be going over 2 separate characters in one video, but this time one of them is a horrible person and the other is their victim. These characters are Blair Proctor and their spouse, Shiloh Kikumoto. Before I get into things, both Blair and Shiloh are non-binary and use they-them pronouns. If you misgender them in the comments after I'm saying it verbally out loud, I will come for your soul. With all of my mandatory thinly veiled threats out of the way, let's talk about the creation of both Shiloh and Blair. Both of them were later additions to the Fangoria universe and were characters that weren't initially conceptualized with the rest of the cast in mind. Shiloh came out almost exactly as I'd imagined that they would be, bar a few minor tweaks here and there from my initial mental image of them. I didn't name them until after I drew them for the first time, if I remember correctly, and I remember being stuck between the names Shiloh and Sawyer before choosing the former. As for Blair's creation, they had an origin story that's a bit more complicated. When Shiloh was first created, my friend Tem offered to help in Blair's creation. I decided that it might be neat to have a full-on co-creator in Blair's development, and thus Tem ended up with some more creative control than he would have if he were just simply suggesting small ideas here and there. Thus, we conceptualized Shiloh's spouse together. It took a few months, admittedly, for us to work them out, but they were initially fully designed and created a little while ago. We really just sat in a Discord call for like several hours and I sketched out their design and we figured out what their features and color palette would be together. I honestly thought we would fist fight a lot more about their design, but the whole thing actually went rather smoothly, LMAO. Just to make it clear, Blair is co-owned by Tem and they belong to both of us, hence why he looked over this video script and added his own notes. Both of their backstories are relatively simple. Shiloh is a Japanese American, and their father immigrated to the US before they were born. Their father's name is Yamato Kikumoto, and after moving to the US he got married to an American woman. After Shiloh was just a couple years old, Yamato's ex-wife left him and he ended up alone with Shiloh. He was a single father for a time before he eventually met a guy named Blake, and the two of them got married a few years later. Shiloh and their dads all moved from Montana to Saratoga, California when Shiloh was in middle school, and that was around the time that they started feeling uncomfortable in their own body and their grades began to slip. Their dad supported them during their gender identity issues and even helped them pay for their top surgery after they turned 18. They later dropped out of college because they were never really academically minded and school was difficult for them all throughout their life. They decided that they wanted to make it into the workforce doing retail work, but never held down a single job for more than a few months at a time. In their early 20s, they moved to San Jose for a time, and when they were 22, met Blair Proctor. Only a few months later, and after turning 23, Shiloh and Blair were married, and the two live in Morgan Hill, California together. Part of the reason why they married so quickly was actually at Shiloh's insistence, and it was a bit of a shotgun wedding and an impulse decision on their part. They both kept their own original surnames when getting married as well. In personality, Shiloh is a lot more lively than they look. They have a pretty snarky and spunky sense of humor and love parties and hanging out with friends. Loud music, a couple drinks, some friends, and the dance floor is how they like to spend their time when they're in the mood to be sociable. When they're alone, they like quieter and more personal activities such as painting and playing their violin. They're a bit of an artist and love expressing themselves through their music and paintings. Unfortunately, they also have a rather low self-esteem and have diagnosed but untreated BPD, or borderline personality disorder, and sadly have a past and extensive history with self-harm. Around their spouse, they're much less lively and upbeat and tend to be quiet and brooding. Their self-harm habits increased steadily after meeting Blair, but since being married to them, those habits have gotten out of control. Blair, unlike Shiloh, was very academically minded when they were younger. They were born alone off the coast of Washington state to no parents, which is typical of their species. Academically inclined, they spent most of their time studying in school. They got their bachelor's degree, which was in marine engineering, and moved to California to find a position. Currently, they're in a managerial position at their workplace. Personality-wise, Blair could be best described as an arrogant control freak. They tend to look down on those that they view as ignorant or stupid, and they are very much of the "if you want something done right, then you must do it yourself" life mantra. Despite being rather introverted, they're actually quite charismatic and have a superficial charm. Many people who know them in passing either look up to them and idolize them, or otherwise have a general positive feeling about them. They also make a lot of gestures to purposely endear themselves to others, such as bringing donuts to the office every Friday. They have undiagnosed and untreated ASPD, or antisocial personality disorder, and as such, underneath all of their charisma, there lies a lack of care and a callous disregard for the rights, autonomy, and intelligence of others. This is particularly apparent in their relationship with Shiloh, which I will return to later. Now, onto the respective species of Shiloh and Blair. If you're unfamiliar with Fangoria in general, then you may be unaware that the gimmick of the universe is that each character is of a different fictional monster species. For example, Ophelia is a shifter, Vince is an arachnid, human hybrid, Arthur, Felix, and Charlie are all dolls, etc. Each of these different species coexist with humans in one way or the other, and their world reflects ours pretty much. Yes, the world building is truly not all that deep, LMAO. Starting with Shiloh, they are a specter. The way I would describe that is that they are somewhat similar to a ghost, though they are also different. Unlike the usual interpretation of a ghost, a specter is actually a species of monster that can reproduce. Like, Shiloh is not a dead person, they're just ghost-like in appearance and also in abilities. Specters like Shiloh can levitate, can become insubstantial and pass through walls, and can even become invisible. So just to clarify, specters are a species of monster, not dead people. Blair, on the other hand, is a shark demon. As mentioned, they were born, or rather hatched, off the coast of Washington state and are a marine species. Though they can travel on land and do live on land, they could also live in underwater cities with other aquatic and marine species. They don't have any notable magical abilities, just physical attributes like gills, a shark tail, and demonic traits like their horns and claws. Shiloh and Blair's relationship is unhealthy, to say the very least about it. Blair infantilizes Shiloh quite often and views them as unstable and airheaded. They view themselves as their spouse's protector, and they tend to micromanage Shiloh's every move. They have worked towards isolating Shiloh from their outside family and friends on the basis that they can protect them and care for them the best. Blair is also heavily critical of any single mistake Shiloh makes, and they belittle them constantly over trivial things. They don't physically harm Shiloh at all, their maltreatment is only limited to emotional and verbal manipulation. They are also not the type to yell, and their threats towards Shiloh are generally more about leaving them rather than about physical violence. They, of course, view their treatment of Shiloh as justified. In many ways, they see it as tough love that is both deserved and will make them stronger in the long run. Shiloh is very desperate for love and affection, and they don't fully grasp how badly Blair treats them. They blame themselves for any domestic dispute, and have been fully convinced that without Blair that they would be nothing, no one, alone, and incapable of going on with their life. They also view Blair as their protector and their savior in many ways, and idealize them in their own brain. As a result of the pain they're experiencing, they have increased their self-harm habits on their own as an unhealthy way to cope with things, and to try and have a little bit of control in the relationship. Their marriage is just unstable, unhealthy, and is all around no good. As for both of their dynamics with others, those are generally also rocky. Prior to their marriage with Blair, Shiloh is good friends with Charlotte Noir and Frederica Stone. The three of them would party and go bar hopping together, and Charlie and Freddie were positive parts in Shiloh's life. When Blair came into the picture, they began isolating Shiloh from Charlie and Freddie, citing them as bad influences who would get Shiloh into trouble or into dangerous situations. Especially being that they are going to clubs and drinking, Blair assumes that Shiloh's friends are bound to encourage them to drink excessively, cheat on them, or do drugs. Blair views both of them with a sort of contempt, especially because they're both assertive people and, especially on Charlie's part, have tried to continue their relationship with Shiloh. Besides the two of them, though, Shiloh has one friend that Blair doesn't really mind so much, and that's Felix. Felix is a good friend that occasionally visits Shiloh's home to spend time with them, as the two of them have a pretty similar sense of humor and similar personalities. He also thinks he knows Blair pretty well and gets along with them alright too. Blair puts up a front around him, and as such, he's clueless about what kind of person Blair really is. They bother keeping up appearances with him because he's weak-willed, reserved, and not too pushy or nosy. Finally, there's Blair's dynamic with Arthur and Vince, both of which Shiloh either hasn't met or, in the case of Arthur, doesn't know very well. Starting with Arthur, Blair met him at a bar one time, and both being business-minded guys who are also controlling neat freaks, they hit it off. They both sort of see each other as friends, though they would also betray each other in a heartbeat for their own gain. They both look down on each other and underestimate each other's intelligence, and their interactions are full of subtle jabs at each other that both of them are generally too conceited to notice or care about. They're kind of like frenemies in that sense. Blair, however, sees Arthur's relationship with Vince as fascinating and hysterical. They find Vince to be, well, pretty grating and strange, and Arthur's weird interest in him is completely captivating to them. Their relationship to Blair is like a car crash. They just can't look away. Not only that, but they take this sort of solace in feeling above Arthur because of his relationship with this stupid pink fuck. Vince hates their ass because they don't respect him even slightly, which is kind of fair to be honest. And they get into fights every single time they're near each other. Or rather, Blair just makes jabs at him and Vince gets offended and argues back. Then Blair thinks it's amusing. Arthur just sits quietly and watches them argue, also sort of amused. It's funny, I just love them. With the relationship dynamics explained, that's the end. The full rundown on Blair Proctor and Shiloh Kikumoto. If you want to read some more specific information about them both, or to see some more art of them, I will link each of their Toy House pages below so that you can check them out. You can also send me an ask on Tumblr if you have a question and you'd like to know more. With all of that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please rate and subscribe if you feel so inclined. You can follow the link to my card in the description if you are interested in following me on other platforms and seeing some of my artwork. Thank you all for watching, I hope you have a nice rest of your day, and I will now bid you all adieu.